Hi again then guys, and welcome to another installment of Rivals on Gran Turismo, and this particular Rivals match is going to be kind of a mini-series within the overarching category of Rivals. It's going to be a 4-part series covering the vehicles of Pagani. Now what we're going to do, we're going to run it down in 2 lots of 3, then 1 two-way battle, and then the winner of each of those 3 battles will go into a final. So we're pitting the 3 Zondas in a head-to-head match, the 3 Huayras in a head-to-head match, including the Anniversary Edition, and the 2 Zonda track cars in a head-to-head match. Then the best Zonda road car, the best Zonda race car, and the best Huayra will go into a 3-way match. So it could be interesting, and it could be potentially surprising which particular car wins each particular match. But first up, let's talk Zondas. So let's get straight into it. First up then we have the Zonda C12. This is where it all started, of course, for Pagani, and it's crazy to think that this car came out almost 2 decades ago. That's crazy. The car has aged very well, and the engine is also, among other things, significantly lesser in sheer numbers than the other 2 Zondas here. It's still a 6-litre though, a 6-litre AMG V12, and by supercar standards it doesn't have that much power. Less than 400 horsepower is not that much at all. There are literally hot hatches now that are pushing those kind of numbers. But the great thing about the Zonda is that based on how good its aerodynamics are, how light it is, how well engineered it is, even by today's standards for the power that it has, it's extremely fast. Far faster than any hatchback would be with similar numbers, that's for sure. So what though about value? Well, it is the cheapest of the 3 at 388,000 credits, and although it is slower than the other 2 around the track, not surprisingly, it is still very close to the other 2. So potentially the value could be very good, considering how much cheaper it is, especially over the 7.3. But how though does it compare to the Zonda S? Well, the Zonda S is of course the next step in the chain. They increased the engine size to a 7-litre AMG V12, still naturally aspirated on Gran Turismo, and despite being naturally aspirated, it's still putting out huge numbers. Well over 1,000 horsepower, huge torque as well, and although it is quite a bit heavier than the C12, and interestingly it's also heavier than the C12 7.3, it's still no slouch. And the best advantage that this car has is that it offers, as I mentioned in the review episode for this car, very similar performance to the 7.3-litre version, but for less than half the price. That is a huge advantage to have. The biggest advantage that the C12 has is how easy it is to drive, and how fast it is for its power. So it's kind of a twofold thing. With the Zonda S, the biggest advantage by far is that price, because it offers so much performance for a really good price for a supercar. What though about the obvious choice of the 3, the 7.3-litre? Well, of the 3, as you'd expect, it is the most popular. The 7.3 is the car of the 3 that if you're going to see someone driving, they are probably driving this version. It costs exactly 1 million credits, which is the kind of price that you typically expect from a supercar of this kind of caliber, and although the specs aren't hugely better than the 7-litre version, it is nonetheless better. And one of the biggest advantages of this car is, of course, it's the fastest of the 3 in a straight line, but beyond that, it's also lighter than the 7-litre. In fact, this version, funnily enough, weighs the same as the 6-litre C12. So it really does offer the best of both worlds. The only disadvantage is the price. It's a lot more expensive than the other 2. In fact, you can buy both of the others and fully tune them for basically the same price as just buying this car. And around the track, as you could see, they basically increase as you'd expect them to. The C12 is the slowest, then the S, and then the C12S 7.3. So around the track they pretty much perform how you'd expect them to. What about on paper though? Well, when you break it down on paper, in kind of a top trumps just for fun kind of way, you do, as always, see numbers, some of which we've already touched on, that a certain car will, of course, take the lead on. But the interesting thing about this match is which cars get which advantages. Because you'd probably assume that just like with the lap time, the points would naturally progress through the three cars as they get better and better. But actually no, because it doesn't fare well for the Zonda S. Despite having potentially the best advantage of the three in terms of value for money, it doesn't score that well for points. Because first up we have the price of the car itself, and of course the C12 gets the point there at 388,000 credits. As far as engine capacity, of course, it's in the name of the car itself. The 7.3 litre version easily gets that point. As far as PP level as well, the 7.3 litre fairly obviously gets that, but interestingly, not by much. The S version is right there behind it. As far as power, again, it does get the lead, the 7.3 litre, but again, not by that much over the 7 litre version, only a 5 horsepower deficit between the two. Then next up, of course, we have the torque output, and once again, fairly obviously, the 7.3 litre does again get that point, but once again, not by much. The 7 litre S version is only about 6 foot-pounds behind it, and both have huge torque outputs. In fact, so does the C12. As far as weight, interestingly, it's a two-way tie between the C12 and the C12S 7.3, with the Zonda S being a little bit heavier than the other two, but all three cars are, even by supercar standards, very, very light. And as far as horsepower per tonne, well, of course, it goes to the 7.3 because not only does it weigh the same as the C12, but it has the most power of the three. So, by definition, it, of course, gets that point to its name. But, interestingly, as far as lap time, and this is really something that you always need to bear in mind about these rivals matches, this is very much theoretical, as I said, top trump style on paper fun. You should not take these rivals matches as being the be-all and end-all of which car to buy. And that's why I always try to make a point of saying that you should check out all of the cars in any rivals match. This is an exact example of why I say that, because the three cars are totally different. They have totally different engine sizes, prices, power, performance, and yet, despite the fact that you may think each car is naturally better than the previous one, which is true, people automatically seem to then think that that makes the slower versions not really necessary, or maybe a lot slower in comparison. But that is not the case. The fastest car of the three compared to the slowest car of the three was only a difference of around 2.5 seconds in lap time. 2.5 seconds is not that much to separate three cars with totally different specs and, even more importantly, totally different prices. So you should bear all three in mind. And if you think about it, if you lower the power, for instance, of the S and the 7.3 down to the level of the C12, they may not necessarily perform as amazingly well as they do here, considering that all of those extra numbers only get them around 2 or 2.5 seconds of advantage. That is still an advantage, but as I said, not one to be blown out of proportion. All three cars are fantastic, and of course that brings us to the points. Now, as I mentioned, it does not fare well for the Zonda S. It gets no points overall, perhaps surprisingly, and I may even say that of the three overall, it's the best car in terms of offering the best of both worlds. But unfortunately, it doesn't get any points on paper. Yet another reason why you should only consider these matches to be purely for the fun of it. Then, coming in second with 2 points, is the original C12 with price and weight. But of course, winning the three-way match is the 7.3 with the largest engine, the highest PP, the highest power, torque, the lowest weight equal to the C12, and of course the highest horsepower per tonne. But overall, all three cars are literally fantastic in their own ways. If you're looking for something a little bit more beginner friendly, perhaps go for the C12. If you're looking for the sheer best of everything, of course go for the C12S 7.3. And if you're looking for high performance on a budget, I would recommend the S. But that's it overall for this particular Rivals match. And as I mentioned before, we will be continuing this Pagani Rivals match series with the three separate Huayras, the 2011, the 2013, and of course the anniversary edition, and then we'll proceed from there. But that's it for this particular episode, and of course that means that the C12S 7.3 has secured itself a place in the final Pagani match. But that's it overall for this matchup. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.